As I walked out the door, I saw a black van parked in front of my house. Before I could react, a woman stepped out, handed me a piece of paper and said, "This is now mine." My knees buckled. How had they taken everything so fast? My name is Sarah, and what I thought was going to be a peaceful new chapter in my life turned into a nightmare. Just a year ago, I inherited my childhood home from my late mother. It was supposed to be a place to heal, to hold on to memories of better days. My mother and I had lived there for years, and every corner of that house told a story. It was more than just a building. It was my sanctuary, my connection to her. I wasn't prepared for what came next. One morning, I got an unexpected knock on the door. A lawyer handed me a legal document claiming that the land had been sold. Confused and angry, I called the authorities, only to be told that it was a legitimate transaction. But I knew something didn't feel right. As the days went by, I started seeing construction workers on my property, and that's when I realized I was losing everything. I was facing a fight I never imagined I'd have to take on. And it wasn't just about the house. It was about protecting my family's legacy. I knew I had to find out who was behind this and stop them before it was too late. The first time I saw him, he was standing at the edge of my yard, talking to the construction crew like he owned the place. A sharp suit, slicked back hair, and a smug look that made my stomach turn. I didn't know who he was yet, but I had a sinking feeling. I walked over, demanding answers, my heart pounding in my chest. "Excuse me, what's going on here?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. The man turned around, his face lighting up with a fake smile. "Ah, you must be Sarah," he said smoothly, as if we were long-lost friends. "I'm Richard Spencer, the new owner of this property." I froze. "What do you mean, new owner?" "This house is mine," I shot back, my voice shaking with disbelief. He nodded, still smiling. "I know, but I bought it, along with several acres of land around it. It was all legally signed off by the court, and your family's property rights were overlooked." He paused, glancing at the workers behind him. "We're just getting started here." I could feel my blood start to boil. Overlooked? This wasn't a simple mistake. This was theft. "You can't do this," I blurted out, barely able to contain my anger. "This is my mother's house. It's been in my family for generations. You don't just take it away like that." Richard didn't flinch. In fact, he chuckled, his voice dripping with arrogance. "Oh, but I can. It's all legal. You see, my company bought the land at an auction, fair and square. The judge signed off on it. You can try to fight it, but believe me, it'll be a long, expensive battle you won't win." I felt like the ground was slipping from beneath me. My family's home, the only place I had left of my mother, was slipping away. And there was nothing I could do to stop it. Richard had this power over me, over all of us. He was a developer who had bought up dozens of properties like mine, bulldozing the past to build his version of the future. All he saw was profit. I wanted to scream at him, to punch him in the face, but instead I took a deep breath. "You may have the money, Richard, but you don't have the right to steal my family's legacy," I said, trying to hold my ground. He raised an eyebrow, amused by my outburst. "It's not about what's right, Sarah. It's about what's legal, and what's legal here is mine. You can either accept it or you can try to fight it in court. But trust me, it won't end well for you." As he turned to leave, I stood there shaking with fury. He didn't even look back. It wasn't just the land he had taken. It was everything my mother had worked so hard for, everything that made this house a home. And he was about to tear it all down for his shiny new developments. I watched him walk away, feeling helpless. But one thing was certain. This wasn't over. He might have money and power, but I wasn't going to just let him bulldoze over me, not without a fight. After that conversation with Richard, I spent days in a haze of anger and confusion, trying to figure out what my next move should be. I was overwhelmed, my thoughts scattered. How could this have happened? How could Richard's company legally take what was rightfully mine, rightfully my family's? Then one night, as I was cleaning out some old boxes in the attic, boxes my mother had kept for years, I stumbled across something unexpected. Tucked behind a pile of dusty family photos was an old leather-bound folder. It looked ancient, like something straight out of a history book. Curious, I opened it, unsure of what I was about to find. Inside was a stack of papers, yellowed with age, some creased at the edges. At first they seemed like nothing more than faded land deeds, but as I scanned through them, my heart began to race. The top sheet caught my eye. It was a land survey dated back to 1915, showing the exact boundaries of our property, every acre, every corner, meticulously marked. I stared at it in disbelief. The survey didn't match the property lines I had seen on the official documents Richard had shown me. There were entire sections missing from the official county records, sections that, according to this old survey, were still part of our family's land. It was like a light bulb went off in my head. The land that Richard and his company were bulldozing, the property they claimed to have legally bought, was ours. The survey revealed that the property they had purchased, the land they had started building on, was actually part of a larger plot, one that stretched an extra 40 acres further than what the county had recorded. Richard's company had bought the land, but they hadn't bought all of it. In fact, they had unknowingly purchased stolen land. The extra land they were now bulldozing was rightfully mine, and I had the evidence to prove it. I could hardly believe it. I felt like I had just stumbled upon the golden key to unlocking everything. Richard hadn't been completely honest with me. The documents they used to justify their claim were based on outdated, inaccurate maps. The land I thought was lost forever wasn't lost at all. It was still ours, and now I had the proof to take action. The discovery hit me like a freight train. For days, I had felt powerless, trapped in a situation where I couldn't win. But this was the game changer. I had something no one else had, the truth. The law might have favored Richard and his company, but it didn't have the full picture. I wasn't just going to sit back and let them tear apart my family's home anymore. With the land survey in hand, I knew exactly what I had to do. I was going to confront Richard, and I was going to make sure he knew that I wasn't going to back down. This wasn't just about the house. This was about restoring what was rightfully ours and protecting my mother's legacy. I wasn't done fighting yet. I had the evidence, and now I was going to use it to take back what was mine. Armed with the old land survey, I knew I had the evidence I needed to challenge Richard and his company. But I wasn't going to stop there. I needed to understand just how deep this corruption ran. I needed to know exactly who was behind this, who was pulling the strings, and how they had managed to get away with stealing from my family for so long. The first step was to talk to my neighbors. I knew the ones closest to me had been living here longer than I had, and they'd seen more than I could ever hope to understand. I made my rounds, starting with Mrs. Harrison, an elderly woman who lived 2 doors down. She had lived in the area for decades, and I hoped she could shed some light on the situation. When I asked her about the development, her eyes narrowed, and she glanced around as if she was afraid someone might hear her. "You know, it's funny," she said in a whisper. "I've seen those trucks going in and out of your property for months now. I always thought something wasn't right. But they were so fast, and no one around here really seemed to care." She paused, then added, "But I've heard rumors. You wouldn't believe the things I've heard about Richard Spencer and his company. People say they've been taking land from families around here for years. They buy it, demolish everything, and put up these fancy condos. It's all a scam." Mrs. Harrison's words were chilling. It was exactly what I feared. Richard and his company weren't just targeting my home. They were doing this all over town. They were using questionable legal tactics to steal land and destroy entire communities, all for profit. Determined to dig deeper, I went online and started researching the developers behind the company. What I found was even more unsettling. Richard Spencer wasn't just some businessman looking to make a quick buck. He was connected to several shady LLCs that, according to public records, had been involved in dozens of land deals, many of which seemed to be linked to illegal or deceptive practices. I traced the ownership of the property through a web of companies that all led back to one name, Richard Spencer. But it wasn't just him. There were others involved. I found his name tied to 6 different LLCs that had made large purchases in the area, often under different names, each one acting as a front for the other. These companies had a history of acquiring properties using aggressive tactics, forcing homeowners to sell for pennies on the dollar before flipping the land for a massive profit. But the most shocking discovery was yet to come. In my search, I came across a series of documents hidden in the court records. They revealed that Richard's companies had manipulated zoning laws to their advantage. They had been paying off local officials to ensure that permits for new developments were pushed through without proper oversight. The entire development plan was riddled with corruption, and it wasn't just Richard Spencer's company behind it. They had deep ties to local politicians, lawyers, and real estate moguls who were all profiting off the land grabs. I sat back in my chair, stunned by what I had uncovered. This wasn't just about a stolen home. It was about an entire operation designed to destroy communities and profit from it. My fight wasn't just against one man. It was against an entire system of corruption that had been allowed to flourish for far too long. The more I dug, the more I realized how much was at stake. This wasn't just my family's home on the line. It was the future of the entire neighborhood, and maybe even the future of the town. If I didn't stop Richard and his companies now, they would continue to tear down families, one home at a time. And as I stared at the piles of documents and notes scattered across my desk, one thing became crystal clear. This fight was bigger than I ever imagined. I wasn't just fighting for my mother's legacy anymore. I was fighting to save my community. Just as I thought I was gaining ground, Richard and his team struck back. And they didn't hold back. It started subtly. At first I noticed a few strange things. My mailbox was knocked over. Then, one morning, I found a thick envelope from the City Code Enforcement Department sitting on my doorstep. Inside was a list of 12 violations, things I'd never even heard of. They were claiming my property didn't meet certain zoning regulations. They said I had illegal structures on my land, even though nothing had changed. It felt like a slap in the face, but that wasn't the worst of it. The next day, I came home to find large concrete barriers blocking my driveway. I couldn't get in or out of my own house. When I tried to speak with the workers, they told me they had been instructed to block access. They claimed I was trespassing on my own property. I was fuming, but I knew I had to keep my cool. I called my lawyer, but before I could even get a response, I was hit with another blow. My water was suddenly shut off, no notice, no warning, just shut off. It was clear now. They were trying to drive me out, to make me give up. It wasn't just about the land anymore. They were trying to break me mentally, emotionally. It was like every time I gained a little ground, they pushed harder, trying to wear me down. I couldn't help but feel cornered. This wasn't a fight anymore. It was a war, and they had the power to make my life a living hell. But I wasn't going to give up. Not now. Not ever. The day of the town hall meeting arrived and my nerves were on edge. This was it. The moment I had been preparing for. I had spent countless nights gathering evidence, reaching out to neighbors, and piecing together a case strong enough to take on Richard and his corrupt empire. I couldn't afford to back down now. As I stepped into the room, I was met with a sea of faces. Local officials, developers, and a few of Richard's supporters were already seated, their eyes fixed on me. Richard was there too, sitting with his smug grin, confident that his money and power would win the day. But this time, I wasn't alone. I had my neighbors by my side, people who knew what was at stake, people who had been affected by Richard's schemes. I made my way to the front, my hands trembling but my resolve unwavering. I took a deep breath and placed the old 1915 land survey on the table in front of me. The room grew silent as I unfolded it, the weight of the moment pressing down on me. "I know you think you've won, Richard," I said, my voice steady, though my heart was racing. "But the truth is, you're sitting on stolen land. The property you've been bulldozing, the homes you've been building, they're on my family's land, and I have the proof to show it." I could feel the tension in the air as the room went still. Richard's face turned pale, his smile fading as he glanced nervously at the map. The survey revealed everything, the landlines, the discrepancies, the years of manipulation. "You've been lying to this town, Richard," I continued, my voice growing stronger. "And today, that ends." The mayor cleared his throat and nodded to the city attorney, who was now looking over the survey. The room was buzzing with murmurs, and for the first time, Richard's power seemed to shrink. The mayor looked up at me, then at Richard. "It seems we have a serious issue here," he said, his voice now more commanding. "We will have to investigate further." Richard's smugness had vanished. He was no longer the confident developer. Now, he was cornered. I had done it. I had taken back what was mine, and I was ready to make sure the entire town knew the truth. The investigation into Richard and his company began immediately after the town hall meeting. The truth was undeniable, and within weeks, the local authorities had reversed the permits granted to his development project. Richard's shady LLCs were scrutinized, and soon, his entire operation unraveled. The city took action, ensuring that my family's land was returned to us and that the stolen property was secured, but the resolution didn't stop there. We didn't just win back the land, we restored our community. The neighbors who had once felt powerless now rallied together, and we worked to create a new, transparent homeowners association. It was built on trust, fairness, and most importantly, a respect for the land and its history. People who had been pushed out, afraid of speaking up, now found their voice. I didn't kick anyone out. Richard was held accountable, but I knew the future of this town was more important than revenge. We had rebuilt something better. A community where families and neighbors could feel safe, where no one could be bulldozed by greed again. As I stood on the land that my grandfather had once walked, I knew he would have been proud. His legacy was no longer just a memory, it was a future, one we had fought to protect. But just when I thought everything was settled, I received an unexpected letter. It wasn't from Richard. It was from someone much higher up, a powerful corporate investor with ties to the mayor. They were threatening to seize more land in the area. This fight was far from over. What would you do if they came for your home next? Would you stand up or walk away? Drop your thoughts and stories below. Let's keep this conversation going.